executive members Shelley Perry and Marjorie Briggs. Our cemetery walk committee members are Laura Lee Hilligan, who's also going to be playing one of our characters, Bethany French, Margaret Shepard, and myself, Gail Banto. Pahs was established in 1969 in celebration of Portland's 100th birthday. For the past 56 years, members have researched and preserved our community's history for the present and for the future. They have pop-up museums for screening to the past and community, as well as informative and entertaining programs at our monthly meetings. And of course, the cemetery walk. This event takes the work of more than a dozen volunteers and many hours of planning, research, writing, costuming, and rehearsal. All of this is at no cost to the public. Today we feature 4 people from our not-so-distant past. Local businessman Larry Barley, played by Brian Cole. Author Betsy Barley, played by Laura Hilligan. Veterinarian Dr. Clayton Cox, played by David Cusack. And midwife and nurse Marie Meitler, played by Pam Robinson. Currently, we are working toward finding a permanent home for all of our artifacts and written histories that we've been collecting for almost 60 years now. Your generosity today will help us achieve that goal. So now, after a few brief instructions, we will begin our presentation. Thank you all for your support. We really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Albert Lawrence Barley. Everyone calls me Larry. I was born August 13th, 1942. My parents were Albert and Elizabeth Barley. They were known as Bud and Betty. My parents moved to Portland in 1938 to a home on Kent Street, just down the street from the library. I went to St. Pat's and had lots of friends like the Hilligans, the Meitlers, the Likes, and Rick Gregg. While growing up on Kent Street, my friends and I went down to the river to swim, fish, and just hang out. We also played softball on Riverside Drive before that was all houses. My family also went down to my grandfather's summer home up at Gull Lake. My dad and my Aunt Ann co-owned a small cottage next to my grandfather. My Aunt Ann was from New York. She was a war correspondent in France during World War II, and before she left to go back to the States, she adopted 2 orphan French children. They moved to New York City. One weekend, while at the summer home, my cousin, his friend from New York, and I let our curiosity get the best of us. We climbed over the fence to the neighbor's yard. The neighbor was a biology professor in Kalamazoo. His name was Dr. Rude. Dr. Rude often brought animals home to study their behavior. The professor was gone that particular day, so we snuck in through his unlocked window. We wanted to see what animal he had there that day. Happened to be a baboon, and it was in a cage. We wanted to pet it, so we opened the cage. The baboon was not a fan of this. It chased us out of the house, across the yard, and back over the fence. However, my cousin's friend didn't quite make it over that fence and was bitten in the leg by the baboon. We surely got into trouble that day. We were sent back to Dr. Rude's house to apologize and get treatment for our friend's leg. Then, in 1954, the city of Portland started a new housing development on the west edge of town, near the high school, what you know as the middle school now. My dad was mayor of Portland, so they named our street Barley Avenue. I was 12. I then joined the Civil Air Patrol, a branch of the Air Force which trained young cadets aged 12 to 21 to help in the emergency homeland situations. My duty was to go to the watchtower, which was located in the orchard back behind our house on Riverside. That was before the highway came through. My job was to watch for enemy planes flying over. Of course, that never happened. When I grew up and made it to high school, I became president of my graduating class of St. Pat's in class of 1960. I was viewed as a leader with strong character. After high school, I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. I studied Russian and became an interpreter. I graduated from college in 1964. That was during the Vietnam War. I knew I'd be drafted, so by the end of the summer, I enlisted in the Navy. However, during that summer before enlisting, I took a job in a gift shop in DC. There I met a young lady, Mary Sue Owen. She was a secretary in the CIA offices. She came into the gift shop often, and I was excited to talk with someone from the Midwest. At the end of summer, I left for the Navy, but Mary Sue and I stayed in touch. I was stationed in Germany because of my degree in Russian. Because the Vietnam War was in full swing, I was eventually transferred to the Navy ship USS Palm Beach. We were a sister ship to the USS Pueblo. Our ships were made to look like marine biology study vessels, but they were filled with surveillance equipment to spy on the enemy. All the guns had been taken off and put down below. Our ship, the USS Palm Beach, was sent to the north to monitor the Russians. Our sister ship, the Pueblo, was sent to the north-south Korean coast. The Pueblo was in international waters while doing surveillance along North Korea's coastline. The North Koreans attacked the Pueblo, killed one sailor who was throwing equipment overboard, and captured all 31 sailors aboard. They were in captivity for 11 months before our country eventually got them released. I'm glad I was sent to the North Sea. The North Koreans, however, gained all the knowledge that we had about surveillance, and they have the USS Pueblo in a museum to this day. After 4 hours in the Navy, I went back to Washington, D.C. to propose to Mary Sue. We were married, moved to Portland, and had 2 children, Tim and Anna. I went to work with my dad at Barley Earhart, making cargo space fabric for the back end of station wagons, truck interior headliners, and we also made noise control devices. In 1990, we started making vinyl laminate and drywall products for commercial use. We employed 15 people. I took over running Barley Earhart after my dad retired. I also served on Portland City Council and on Portland School Board. I was an active member of the Ionia Republican Party and an alternate delegate to the Republican Party when President Gerald Ford was appointed. The car sales business and production changed. Our business slowed. Then in the early 2000s, the city of Portland was interested in developing an area for the band shell and a memorial park. So my partner, Albert Silber, and I sold Barley Earhart to the city, and I retired. Mary Sue and I spent time being grandparents to our 6 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. We had several years of family time before I developed Alzheimer's and passed away on August 31st, 2018, at the age of 76. I had a very interesting life, and I have very few regrets.
Good. I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to tell you, before the whistle blows, I joke like I'll get out when that thing goes. I would say it's enough to raise the dead, but that's bad. Anyway, I have to tell you too, I'm just going to start a little early. I'm Maureen Meitler, and I was born here in Portland on August 5th, 1908. And before I get started, I will tell you, because I'm an old lady, I had to write out a few notes. I hope you don't mind. And I have to use my glasses because, let's face it, I can't see all that well anymore either. There we go. Oh, 2 this time.
You jump.
I didn't jump this time. I was looking at her. So anyhow, yes, I am Marie Meitler, and my parents were Arthur Baker and Mary Clementine Lombardi, but everyone called her Minnie. She came here from Italy, and my father's family was from Portland. My brothers, sisters, and I all grew up in a house full of love, devotion, fun, service to others, and most importantly, the best food you ever tasted in your entire life. My mother was a devout Catholic and always helped those in need, which brings me to how I met my husband. After high school, I attended nursing school at St. Joseph's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. When I moved home, I didn't have to go far to look for work because Mother was taking care of a young woman who had been in a serious automobile accident and she needed extensive care. Her name was Grace Meitler. Now, while we were caring for Grace, of course, her brother came to visit, and I noticed, and while he was visiting, I often would pop into her room just to see if she needed something, say hello, all of those things. So when it was time for Grace to go home and she was healed, Dee asked me if I would see him socially. Well, of course I said yes, immediately. And we were married on November 24, 1936. We rented a house down there on Kent Street, and our daughter Beverly was born there in 1939. Then the boys, Thomas in 1942 and James in 1945. By that time, we'd moved into a larger home on Maple Street, and that's where I ran my 2-bed maternity ward. Now, a lot of women were going to the bigger hospitals to have their babies then, but Portland didn't have a big hospital, so mine was always the best option, and it really was the best. Mothers and babies stayed with me for 8 days, and during that time period, I would teach the mom how to care for her infant and also how to care for herself. The experienced mothers that I saw, they were just enjoying the time to recover and the rest and relaxation that they were getting. Of course, I charged a fee for my services, but if someone came to me and they couldn't pay, I would never turn them down. One day, years after I had stopped delivering babies and helping the moms, I received a bank check and a letter from a woman that had received service from me before. And she told me that it was the best care she had ever been given, and it was finally time she had the money to pay me. And I was just so taken back by that. And I couldn't remember her name, but I felt so grateful and appreciative at that point in time. By 1948, Dee and I bought the big house on the corner of Grant and Academy. It had 3 bedrooms and a large sleeping porch with 2 garages, a playhouse for the children, and plenty of room for my rose garden. I worked in my rose garden, and it was a way to help me relax. At one time, I had 120 roses. And, not only did I enjoy them, but the neighbors from everywhere came walking by to look at my roses. I was so proud. And, I decided to start providing convalescent care instead of the mom and baby care. So Dee and I planned to put an addition on the house and call it our hospital. He was going to build 1 private room for a man and 1 private room for a female, and then 2 wards, 1 for females, 1 for males. Well, before we were going to start construction, Dee hurt his knee at work. It just shattered in an accident there. Well, he couldn't help with the construction, of course, but his friends and co-workers came over and they built that hospital for us. That is what you call friendship. So when Dee recovered, he went to work managing Bob Lear's grocery store. And every afternoon, he would call me and he would get the grocery order for the next day. It was so sweet like that. And my first patient in the facility was Father Chloe's brother. It wasn't called hospice then, but that's really what I was doing. Most of my patients were women, and they stayed with me, some until they passed away. But I like to think that I helped them a great deal. My reputation as a caregiver had gone all the way to Detroit. The director of the Shriners Club in Detroit called me asking for the best care in the state for his mother who needed convalescent care. Well, of course, he brought her out to Portland and I cared for her until she passed. And every week he would drive all the way from Detroit to Portland. just to see his mom. And that was before I-96. It was a long ways. Running a nursing home was a very demanding job. Each and every day, beddings were changed, patients washed, dressings changed, and medications administered. I'm very proud to say that my patients never had bed sores. I developed a method of rotating them every few hours to avoid that pressure. I also checked them every day to make sure that there wasn't any tenderness or redness. And if it was developing, I would start my procedure and it would clear up in no time. Besides all the other daily duties, everyone needed to be fed 3 times a day. I was very fortunate that my mother and grandmother taught me to cook very early, and believe me, I was a very good cook. My boys were always so grateful to know that they would have fresh cookies or fresh pie when they finished their work, and I got them to cooperate far much easier. Now, laundry was the big job. Every bed was changed daily and sometimes more than once. So, the clothesline out back was constantly full of sheets, even in the winter. My wonderful D, he meant well, and he wanted to help me with the laundry so bad. So he bought me an automatic clothes dryer. Unfortunately, I used it for the paper bags and other various items that I would use to make disposable pads and diapers. Oh, I tried the automatic dryer, but you know, it just took so long. So out to the clothesline they went again, even in the winter. And also, Bev, my daughter, was about 15 when she asked if she could help with the patient care. Of course I said yes, and I gave her the job of cleaning all of the patient's dentures. Now, it wasn't until after I found her with a large basin of water and a tray full of false teeth that I realized I should have given her more specific instructions. It took us forever to find whose teeth belonged to whom. And honestly, Bev was demoted and back down to making bed pads. She always referred to that incident as the day her own mother fired her. My job running a convalescent home was almost all-consuming. I never drove an automobile. I never took a vacation, and I never went to the Sunday dinners at my mom's house. But I never missed Sunday Mass at St. Patrick's Catholic Church in Portland. At Christmas, we would have just a small celebration at home, and then Dee and the children would be off to my mother's house for fresh donuts and homemade potato chips. I stayed with the patients, and I gave my employees the day off. I charged $100 a month to provide those services, and then Dee told me that we were spending more money on groceries and supplies than we were bringing in. So I knew I would have to close down. My last patient was my father. Oh, in 1963, I went to work for Dr. Kozaczyk here in town. It wasn't much of a nursing thing. Mostly I just gave sports physicals to the kids. Well, anyhow, I'm going to briefly run through. My husband became very sick. He had emphysema, and one time when he was hospitalized, the doctors found a blood clot in his abdomen. Doctors said that he wouldn't survive surgery, so we did not leave his side until he died on December 30th, 1972. I lived a few more years. I lived with my daughter Bev when we found out I had lymphoma. And you know, the kids never left my side through that entire time, not day or night. And I realized the best roses I had ever raised were my children. And that's it. Now you can move on.
Patsy. You met my younger brother Larry, right? Okay. That'll be a little easier because he talked about some of the things to do with the family and growing up, and we all did the same thing. He's my younger brother. We also had three sisters, Gail, Joni, and Mary Louise. Joni's right there, next to the family, all here. We had a great time living in here in Portland. My father owned a car parts factory in Detroit. Heard about an old factory building here in town that the city wanted to get occupied, and so my dad came to look at it, decided to buy it, and started to move his Detroit factory to here. And over the period of 4 years, eventually moved the offices and everything here. I'm sure it was a lot less expensive to run a business here than it was in Detroit. We lived on Barley Avenue. We hung out with all of the kids on Grand River Avenue. My girlfriend Patty Hilligan and I used to go down to the old factory ruins that were down along the Grand River, and we'd play house, or we'd play like we were running a store or whatever. We played softball with the guys. We had tons of fun as kids. We went to St. Pat's, and that was confusing to me.
Time to start.
And as we got a little bit older, we went downtown and did window shopping and went to Mervin's drugstore because they had a soda fountain there, and they had great ice cream sodas and Cokes and cherry Cokes with real cherry flavoring in them, not like anything today. We had, and then as we got a little bit older and into high school, then the Blue Note came in. The Blue Note was also had a soda fountain, and it had a jukebox and made hamburgers. So it was an even better place to go and hang out. While we were in school, Patty and I were cheerleaders, went to the sports and all the games. We went to the library a lot. I was really into writing and doing research for papers and those kind of things. So when I graduated in 1956, I decided that I would go on to University of Michigan and go into journalism. My dad always kind of expected us to be the best we could be. And so I got to U of M, joined the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority. Stop and think about it. And one of my sorority sisters, Judy Landon, her and I became really good friends. And we ended up hanging out and going to the football games together and parties. Sometimes Patty Hilligan would come down and hang out with us, and she was dating a guy from David from Notre Dame. And David came one weekend to, it probably was a Notre Dame U of M game, I'm thinking. And he brought a friend with him, Warren Greenenberger. And but I found out later that it was kind of a setup between him and Patty because it was a blind date kind of thing. And so we ended up dating and spent most of the time in college writing back and forth, and he would come visit when he could. Then when I graduated from U of M, Judy and I decided that we were going to go to the big city and went to Chicago. I got a job with the I'm sorry. I got a job with the Journal of American Medical Association, and we had a really nice apartment there. Warren would come on the weekends to visit. We'd go up to Old Town to the blues jazz clubs and see who was playing, and I happened to meet this young man right here and fell for him. He's Malcolm Hale, who is a pre-med student, and he was working in the jazz clubs singing to make money to get through school. Well, Elaine McFarland, she had a band that she had formed, and she came to Chicago looking for places to play. Noticed Malcolm and asked him to join the band. They became Spanky and Our Gang, the pop rock group. Somebody noticed them and asked them to come to LA to play as a startup band for the more popular bands that were in concert at that time. So they packed up, went to LA, and I decided I'm going to become a groupie. You know, I could freelance write and send it back to Chicago. So Warren and I had a talk. He wanted to go to Europe, so we parted ways and stayed friends. And I took off for LA. They were a short time in LA touring before the manager wanted to take them to New York. So I flew back to Chicago and talked with Judy about moving to New York. Well, Judy really wanted to move to England. So we parted ways, and she went to England, and I went to New York to Greenwich Village. In the 60s and 70s, Greenwich Village was the place to be. I mean, it was the hub of all the artists and musicians and writers and poets, and they had galleries everywhere and pubs everywhere and off-Broadway theaters, and it was just hopping. All of us writers would get into all the wonderful coffee shops there, and we would talk about all the current events and the anti-war movement and the gay rights movement and all of the events that were going on. I ended up getting a job at the Medical World News and as a writer, and I also wrote freelance for Travel and Leisure magazine with help ideas on how to stay healthy while you're traveling. I also wrote for articles for Good Housekeeping and Physicians Weekly. I was a member of the National Association of Science Writers, and I eventually became one of the editors of Newsweek magazine. In the late 70s, I joined staff of Albert Einstein College, and there is where I met Mark Bloom. We teamed together with Kinney Shoes and did the research and wrote this book, Young Runner's Handbook. And it's a guide for young runners and their parents. It talked about what exercises to do and what snacks to eat and to stay away from sugar and what kind of shoes to wear and all of the good things that it was doing for your muscles and your bones and how it stimulated your brain and kept you active. Because what we were finding was that the video game business had just come into play, and all of these young people were sitting in front of the TV watching video games. So we were hoping that that would help get them out and active again. In the mid-80s or so, I started getting interested in Asian art. And we had a wonderful gallery in Greenwich Village. And the more I went in there, the more interested I got. So I decided to go to fly to Hawaii to the International Art Institute and study Asian art. I also became director of the Asian Film Festival. But while I was there, I started to get sick. And over-the-counter drugs weren't helping, so I decided to move back to New York to see my doctors there. They did tests, they did x-rays, and diagnosed me with pancreatic cancer. And back then, there were no medicines, no cures. So I called my sisters and had them come to the village and pack up my apartment and take me back here to Michigan, where I ended up getting really sick. They took me right to the hospitals in Grand Rapids, and I passed away on September 7th, 1989, at the age of 50. I had a short life, but I had a wonderful, amazing life. And the best thing about it is that I did the max of what I could possibly do to satisfy my demands. And you can't ask for anything more than that. Thank you for listening.
Well, greetings, folks. My name is Clayton E. Cox. My journey began in Hart, Michigan. I grew up there with two brothers and one sister on my parents' agricultural farm. We had apple and pear and cherry trees there in an orchard, and a few small farm animals. Over the course of our childhood, our father had us working day and night, keeping that farm looking good. When we were adolescents, Father refused to buy a tractor, and this is when I told my parents I would be attending college. I decided to go to Michigan Agricultural School located in East Lansing with the intention of becoming a specialist in animal care. I graduated in 1942 with honors as a veterinarian. My siblings chose their own paths as well. Donald moved to California. Jerome died in World War II flying for the Air Force. Our sister Vivian became a nurse, and eventually she moved to Schwartz Creek, Michigan. Shortly after I graduated veterinary school, I moved to Portland, and eventually I opened up my own practice. It wasn't long before I set my eyes on a young woman I couldn't help but want to meet. I learned that her name was Marion Lehman. After asking around town about her, I found out that she worked at Spitzley's, a local shop in downtown Portland. So I went in there to see her, and I asked her, where could I buy some pig fence? She didn't know what that was, of course. But it opened up doors for introductions, and our story began. And I was happy to introduce myself as Dr. Clayton Cox, veterinarian to large animals and small. Marion and I got married and resided in a little house on Elm Street. Later, we bought our house at 308 Academy Street. I ran my vet clinic out of the walkout basement. My office had one room for the surgery, kennels for boarding, an area for visiting hours, but mainly I traveled and made house calls. In the beginning of the clinic days, I would take a call and travel out only to come back home and find there'd been another call and I'd have to leave immediately and go out again. Primarily I'm covering Ionia and Clinton counties at that time. Marion keeping busy answering the phones and taking messages, relaying them upon my return. And I will tell you, all became much simpler when we bought a two-way radio for communication while I was out on the road. And what a difference that made in our office regimen. Life had seemed so busy, and then it became even busier as I was serving as captain for the Corporation of Vets, an avid member of the Michigan Veterinary Medical Association and the National Association of the Veterinary Medical Association. Marion and I, we welcomed our first child, John, in 1947, and our sweet little girl, Louise, 8 years later. We would spend time away from home only to go to Marion's folks' house out there at Dickerson Lake. We eventually bought a speedboat, and to make sure the kids were all safe, we gave them all a swimming test off the end of the dock before we'd let them venture out on that boat. We went fishing for bluegill and perch, and Marion enjoyed cooking up the catch. And there's nothing better than a fresh-caught, pan-fried perch, don't you think? The kids enjoyed the ease of pumping water and using an outhouse for the loo. Sometimes we traveled as far as Ross Common or the Mackinac Bridge, but things weren't easy for long family vacations if you were a single doctor-owned practice. So the days and nights were kept very busy with my growing family. And I'll tell you what, sometimes it was very difficult to get payment for services. I never turned away a client. Sometimes I had to accept payments in form other than cash. I'll remember one time I was offered an old dresser that wasn't being used. I took it and gave it to my daughter Louise. More often we were negotiating or bartering for beef and other farm products. Well, by the time Marion was 30 years old, she was diagnosed with MS. I sold the business. This changed everything. I sold the business to Dr. Bruce Beach now. We moved out of that clinic house to a ranch-style house on Knox Avenue to accommodate Marion's needs. I continued to help Dr. Beach now as he needed, and was quite often called to assist delivering calves. But I took a job as a meat inspector for the Department of Agriculture. So I filled my time between that and serving on the MSU ROTC reserves. This allowed me to continue to take vet calls, work with other doctors, and stay close to home and never be sent out on active duty. I developed an interest in the Menard State Bank, and I ended up serving on the board of directors. This is now known as Huntington Bank. Now I'm going to tell you about the second love of my life, my rose gardens. That's right. I had almost 80 shrubs. My son John, he would fish. By the way, John would fish for perch, he would fish for carp out the back door of Lehman's, right in the Grand River there. And I'd take that catch, that carp, perfect thing to nourish the roots of a rose bush. That's right. That's my secret. Now you know. I always had a smile on my face when my children were around. Louise helped me in the clinic quite often, as well as the field. She made a good assistant. Didn't inquire too much. I paid her 25 cents to clean a dog kennel, a penny to fill medicine capsules for the cows. She stocked shelves, greeted customers. She used to help me castrate pigs. But she didn't really know what was going on. That was for her own betterment. Didn't seem to raise a lot of questions. If the farm I was going to was kept in a good, clean condition, while Louise could come along and she could assist me or play with kittens or whatever, but if there was a chance she was going to get overly dirty, she was not coming. One time, I had her help me administer ether for a dog and surgery, and I decided after that John was better suited for the job. Oh, one time I delivered twins, calves, and Louise was fascinated by this. I told her they could have triplets as well, but it was not so common. There was a charge of $5 to spay a small dog, $10 for a large one. Oh, one time a herd of cattle ate bad apples, all of them. We had to give all of them medicine. And I warned Louise, I'll never forget this, I warned Louise, but she ended up messing around and got chased by a rampant bull. Now, there were so many adventures on the farms, but there was just as many adventures at home. Quite often people began to stop dropping off animals that needed to be rehomed, which I picked up in due diligence. I made good friends here. Good friend Doc Anderson, Leo Lehman. Leo owns a clothing and shoe store downtown. Everyone loved going shopping there for their work attire and casual as well. I played in the poker club with Walter Sprague, Wayne Foote, Dick Derby, Larry Keyline. Our chips were made from leather. Boy, did we look forward to that once-a-month adventure. Now, a little more often, I would play I'd spend an evening with my friend Jack Quinn playing cribbage. Well, my sweet Marion passed away at the young age of 50. And although we had 30 years in marriage, I miss her every day. I continued to cater to the children and the rose gardens. I assisted other doctors as necessary and spent my time playing poker and cribbage with the old friends. I enjoyed the company of my friend Betty Hancock and took her fresh cut roses in the evenings. As for my children, John served honorably as a medic in Vietnam. However, I think he died young, and that war was not good for him. Despite them saying he survived the war. Louise, though, she flourished. She became a teacher and taught for many years, serving here in Portland. Very proud of her, and to this day, she continues teaching at the Voss Children's Hospital. Her husband, she met her husband Brad, also a teacher, and he served for many years. And I'm proud of all of them. And that is my story and my legacy. Thank you.